All right, welcome back. Episode 6. I'm Turn.
I'm Bark.
And we are still going to be here for a long time. So this next topic, we didn't announce at the end of our video after receiving a bunch of suggestions from the history of chocolate to Andrew Jackson to recessions to even a musical. Did I tell you we had a attempt at a guest appearance? That's how big we're getting. So Mr. Garden and Mr. Pimpleton, shout out. They're trying to get on our show. So hopefully we can arrange something like that. But what we ended up deciding on was from Mr. Medina over at Mountain View Elementary. And he wanted to know the Electoral College, or wanted us to talk about it. So Electoral College, Barker, you want to start us off here?
So the big thing that always comes up every election is people always sit there and say, why should I vote? My vote doesn't matter because there's this thing called the Electoral College. And nobody seems to, we don't really have this great grasp of how it really works. So if we look at the results of the last election, President Trump had 306 electoral votes. Hillary Clinton had 232, despite the fact that Hillary Clinton had 3 million more votes
around
in the national popular vote. Huh?
2.8 mil.
Oh, 2.8. Sorry, I rounded.
Well, this isn't math,
but people are always asking, how does that work? Why do we have the Electoral College? And so we took a dive back, and we're also going to look at some possible solutions on how we could change it. Some people say get rid of it, and that through research that's become a really difficult thing because then you have to make this thing called an amendment to the Constitution, and those are really hard to do. There's only 27 of them in like 200 years. So it's a lot easier if we just tweak the way we use it. So, Mr. Turner, if you'd like to talk about how it started.
So, going back really quick on what you said, though, don't you think tweaking it would require a constitutional amendment anyway?
My interpretation was that states are free to award their electors as they wish.
Okay, so if states all agree to it, they could do it without having to do the formal amendment process.
States don't have to agree, though, because Nebraska and Maine use a different system. 48 states use the winner-take-all method, where if you win, like Hillary Clinton won 52% of the popular vote in Washington, but she gets all 12 of our electoral votes. Where in, we'll talk about that. Well, Maine and Nebraska use a congressional district system. Like Maine has, if you look up, where's my finger? If you look up in that corner right over there, there's a little red dot instead of blue Maine, because they have 2 congressional districts, and one of them voted for Trump, or had a majority of people who voted for Trump. The other one had a majority of people who voted for Clinton. And then in the statewide election, more people voted for Clinton than for Trump. So Hillary got 3 votes, and President Trump got 1 out of Maine.
So I guess I'm saying, though, if we wanted to actually make corrections that you and I see fit to the Electoral College, it would need to be a national agreement, right? Washington could do it to make people's vote count more, but we'll get into that later. Okay, so the Electoral College is a system, one of the most contentious points at the Constitutional Convention, which, if you've been watching our shows, George Washington was president of said Constitutional Convention, because it would not have ran without him. Anyway, people were trying to decide who should elect the president of the United States. And one of the big points that people brought up was, well, let's let the elected officials, right? So Congress, in this sense, would elect the president of the United States, similar to, we could compare it to like a Canadian prime minister, in which their job is to kind of carry out the laws. But our system is different. So you had people who said Congress, you had people who said directly the people should vote. And one of the biggest concerns with the people voting directly is that people can be wrong. They can make some uninformed decisions and things like that. But the bigger concern was because travel was such a luxury at the time that people wouldn't actually get outside their own state. And so the fear was that people would only vote for people from their state. And that would be a major concern. Again, the founders and framers of the Constitution could never have imagined even the political parties that will spring up by the 1800s and develop where people will be informed and educated by that political party in their state of the two candidates without either candidate having gone to any of those states. So the solution that kind of was given up was, let's let the people vote for president. However, we're going to have them actually not vote for the president directly. We're going to have them vote for electors who will then go cast a vote for a state. And the way this breaks down is every state gets a vote for every member of Congress. So every state's guaranteed 2 senators, so you get 2 votes. Every state's guaranteed 1 representative. The smallest number of electoral votes that you could have is 3. After that, it's based off your population in the House of Representatives. So there are 8 states that only get 3 votes: Alaska, Delaware, Washington, D.C., which again, not a state, but they have won the right to participate in the presidential election. Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming. Okay, and then one of the things that was also thrown in here that Barker's going to talk about right now is what if, so you have to get the majority of votes to win the election. And what happens if no candidate gets that majority? Barker's going to kind of tell us about that.
Yeah, so simple math. I don't have any magical graphics for you for this one, but there's 100 senators, right? 50 states, 2 senators. So that's easy math. 50 times 2 is 100. And then we stopped adding members of the House of Representatives at 435. So that's 535 plus the extra bonus 3, because they decided that Washington, D.C. gets the same number of electors as the smaller states, because it actually has a larger population than Vermont or Wyoming. So that's kind of fair there. Anyways, so you have to reach 270 is the benchmark where you have the majority of the electoral votes. And there's actually a system in place where that if you don't reach 270, it goes to a contingent election where the representatives will vote, and each state only gets 1 vote in the election. So it's out of 50. DC doesn't get a vote anymore because it's not a state.
Because they don't have the federal government. Representative. It's because the House is the one who gets to vote for president, and they don't have an official representative that can vote in the House, so therefore they don't get a vote.
Yeah. And so, like, I was looking at it, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, in one of the potential solutions to the Electoral College. 2016 would have resulted in a lack of majority. And so it would have gone to the Congress, it would have gone to the House of Representatives to be decided. And in the 114th Congress, there were 34 states with a Republican majority and 14 states with a Democratic majority of representatives. So even if one of the amendment, like we changed it, went back in time, which, played what if, Hillary would still not gain the presidency because the majority of states would have been Republican majority states, and they would vote for Trump, one would assume, in a contingent election if there had been one this last time.
So again, and then what's other interesting is that we used to vote, when this all started, we used to vote for the top 2 people would get the first place would get presidency, second place would get the vice presidency. And we've obviously changed that. When election of 1800 mucks that all up and people fix it. But what ends up happening is the Senate also gets to vote for vice president. So the Senate would go and they would vote, and you'd need a majority of them against that same delegation contingent rule where every state gets 1 vote. You need 26 votes to seal the deal up. So looking at this, it's become kind of a contentious issue, as John brought up. One of the biggest things is, well, we look at our own state of Washington, and we live in Eastern Washington, which tends to have a more conservative viewpoint, thus voting Republican most of the time. When you look at a map of Washington results by county for the presidential election, you will see that the majority of our state looks like it's red. However, the majority of our population lives in 3 counties. Seattle is a part of King County, Snohomish County, and Pierce County, where I'm from. are the 3 biggest counties, and you'll notice that they're all blue. You can see that image above Barker's head, the differences in color and stuff like that. John, you want to explain that color difference really quick? Is just where it's.
Do I need to flip it?
You used to have lighter. Sorry, my apologies. It's you have dark red on one, lighter red, and then dark blue and lighter blue. So I assume those are major strongholds of Republican and Democrat versus lesser spots.
Yeah. So the map over here is the one that everybody wants to look at, and it doesn't really. It's not a very good picture of what really happens in an election, because this is a map of results by counties in Washington state, and the deeper the blue and the red is, the margin of victory, and that's from 2016. A lot of people look at that and say, well, look how red Washington is, but Trump doesn't get a single electoral vote out of that. But if you look over here to the other side, this is a map of the congressional districts in Washington, and so there's 10 different congressional districts. And so, like, the shapes are bigger, and I did have a picture for this, but I got rid of it. But in reality, if you look at congressional districts, Trump would have won District 4, 5, and 3. So southwestern Washington, and then the 2 that are predominantly in eastern Washington, which is kind of like the blue one, the yellow one, and the red, kind of purple. This blue one, this one right here, and then this one right here. These were the 3 that would have gone to Trump in the last election. While there is a couple of counties that are red up here in this region, the margin of victory was really small in those counties that went red, but you can see that it's a much deeper blue in the county. Sorry, I'm playing depth perception here. In the county that voted for Hillary. So that swung their margin of victory in that one county, kind of outweighed the other 2. Counties are a terrible way of looking at election results because they're not uniform in physical size, and they're not uniform in population, where congressional districts, while not uniform in space, are uniform in population, relatively speaking.
So when we talk about this, one of the biggest concerns that people have in a presidential election is they say, well, why would I vote? Right? Like, if I'm a liberal voter, why would I vote? Washington will go blue. It's fine. And then the conservative voter in Washington says, well, I'm conservative. And, the last time we elected a president that was a Republican where Washington got their votes was Ronald Reagan. So it's been a while. And so we have always looked at this, and we've discussed this with our students all the time about what could this look like and what are some of these solutions. Well, there have been multiple attempts to try and change the Electoral College. And the first one that we saw was called the Bear-Celler movement. And it happened after the 1968 election. Richard Nixon versus Herbert Humphrey. And Nixon wins in a landslide. It's 301 to 191. And to me, when I look at elections, if you hit that magical 300 mark, you're good, right? You have a majority by over 30 votes. The thing about it is Nixon only won the popular vote by 511,000 or 512,000 people. And so a lot of people looked at that and said, whoa, like, he won in a landslide, but he only got this many more votes. Well, now we also have those instances of, there's 5 of them in history where a president has won the Electoral College but not won the popular vote. And again, the most recent is 2016. Donald Trump won, as you saw on the map behind Barker, but he lost by 2.8 million votes in the popular vote. So again, if a lot of sides, whoever side loses the election is crying out, what? No, like, why with the Electoral College? Like, we voted, blah, blah, blah. It always happens. But when we look at this, there's a reason the founders put the Electoral College in place. And it's so that every state has some matters and you should care about it. And so we've always talked about solutions. We've even come so close as to saying that we've worked on writing a referendum or initiative, not a referendum, initiative for our state to go ahead and try and make a change to our electoral system. We just haven't gotten time yet.
Yeah, I was doing some reading, and they said that you can technically win a U.S. presidential election if you can carry 11 out of these 12 states. If you can win California, New York, Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, New Jersey, Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia, or 11 out of those 12. You miss one of them, you can technically win, and you don't need a landslide. You just need a simple majority, 51% or 50.5%. You can carry the U.S. election or win the Electoral College with just those 11 of those states. It's interesting. A lot of states award the winner take all based on a plurality, so you don't even have to win the majority. So if there ever was a third party candidate, like people talked about Jill Stein in 2016, if somebody had gotten 46% of the vote, they would still get 100% of the electoral votes in 48 of the states, or 48 of the states plus DC in the status quo. So the first thing that we said is we said that we should do it by a district method. So behind me, the people at 270 to win, their website is 270 to win. I think it's .org, but did an amazing job where you go through and play the what if game. And so Washington would give 9 votes to Hillary and 3 votes to President Trump. So we're talking about those 3 districts, in the 2 in Eastern Washington, the 1 in Southwestern Washington, that had the majority of voters that voted for President Trump would get representation in the way that they're saying that they don't right now. So it kind of allows minorities to feel like they get heard in some of those states. But kind of one of the downsides is it makes gerrymandering even a bigger issue, because in a lot of states, like you can kind of break up, like maybe in Texas or in California. In California, they break up a Republican stronghold and add it to other majority Democratic districts. And then when they redistrict in Texas, they would add, maybe they break up a Democratic stronghold into a bunch, give it little pieces of it into other Republican strongholds. And there's examples from both parties. Nobody's hands are clean in that.
Oh yeah, big time.
But it's still, by awarding the 2 senatorial votes based on the state popular vote, it's still kind of like at times it can give like too much weight. And that's kind of the purpose of those 2 extra votes, the senatorial votes, is that it does allow the rural communities in the smaller states that Turner listed earlier to get a little bit extra, like more of a boost for representation. They still don't get visited anyways. The majority of campaigning only happens in those larger states. Mm-hmm. But like I looked at this and it said, if we did it this way, Trump would have won in 2016 290 to 248. And in 2012, Obama actually would have lost 274 to 264.
Oof.
And so he won the popular vote, but if we did it like no plans like perfect. Well, yeah, maybe there might be one that's better than this one, but like that's one of the ways that like I kind of got frustrated with this one, is that it's not as accurate as it could be.
So one of the big issues though when we talk about this and we look at it is some people cry just for the straight popular vote. And what that does is that you might feel better as a voter, right? Like you're like, yeah, my vote counted and everything like that. But you're now eliminating, like Barker said, like you have some of these major states where you need to campaign and things like that. But, like Bernie Sanders came to Washington. Elizabeth Warren, I believe, came to Washington. And so we had these people show up. And we're a little bit bigger. We have 12 electoral votes, so it does. We're not up there, but we're still better off than a lot of other states. And so a lot of people, when we cry for this popular vote, like you have to remember that you're going to eliminate a lot of campaign. Like campaign is just going to be in the major cities for the most part, because that's where your votes are. I mean, so you're going to lose some of those, people going to Iowa, people going to New Hampshire, right? Because these votes you need them. You gotta, that helps seal up some of those campaign. But again, like Barker said, we have a 12 of those states that are the dominant and the powerhouse. You have one more we were just talking about before we went on, about an idea that you had that could even be better than this one.
Yeah, well, first I want to, as far as the national popular vote, there actually is like a kind of a compact or an agreement of states. There's 15 states plus DC that have agreed that once they get over 270 electoral votes and all the states added up, They have pledged that they will all just give all of their electors to whoever wins the national popular vote. So even if, like, California is one of them, and so is Washington, but even if it was a Republican candidate, if they followed that pledge, they would give all 12 of Washington's electors to the Republicans because they got the majority of the votes. And the reason that they do this, and it's largely Democratic states, is that it's largely Democratic presidential candidates that win the popular vote and lose the electoral vote. So it benefits. It's a lot more of the liberal states than it is the red states, because when this disparity happens between the popular vote and the electoral vote, it generally tends to lead to a Republican president. But anyway, the better system that I was looking at was using a proportional system. Did that flip over?
Yep, you're good.
Yeah. So what you do is you take the popular vote in each state and you take the percentage, and then you take the number of electoral votes, and then you award them the total number of electoral votes, and then you just award them based on that proportion or the percentage that they won. So like Hillary Clinton won 52 or 54% of the vote overall in the state of Washington. And so she would get 7 votes and Trump would get 5 votes. With that being said, Trump would get 267 votes and Hillary would get 265. So that would be, it's a lot closer to the popular vote. That would have led to, again, a contingent election where Trump would have still prevailed in the House of Representatives.
Yep.
So if you take that back to 2012 in Obama's re-election, his margin of victory would have dropped. He still would have won 281 to 257. And so that gives even more voice to people in those minority areas. Like you would say, well, Washington's almost 50-50 as far as like Republicans and Democrats, or at least who voted the way they voted in the last election. And they would get those, it would be a more clear representation of what the popular vote was. And I think that's really what everybody keeps clamoring for. How do we get it to be the popular vote without making it the popular vote? And I think that comes from the fact that if we wanted to just abolish the Electoral College, it requires an amendment to the Constitution, which is really hard to do. But if states just change the way that they award their electors under kind of like, the way that our federalism works, they have the power to choose how to award their electors. So it would allow the states to do what they want. Now, obviously, you kind of start playing party politics. Washington's probably not going to want to try and give, as far as the Democratic Party of Washington doesn't want to give those 5 votes over to the Republicans. It's really interesting, though, because like in California, I think California only would give away like 4 or 7 votes out of their 55. So like California is pretty significantly Democratic. But Texas is really interesting because Texas, which you can't see 'cause it's behind my fat head, this is almost like, it's more of almost like a 45-55. There's a lot more. So I mean, maybe that's an argument against gerrymandering. There is that there really are a lot more Democrats in the state of Texas than people think there are. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. Like to flip that, like Florida is a lot more Republican than it seems. Florida is like 50-50. But when you look at a map of county or congressional districts, Democrats tend to win the small, densely populated urban districts, where the Republicans tend to win the more rural, which isn't a surprise to anybody who looks at U.S. politics. But this would be a better way of getting people to feel like their vote and their voice is heard more directly.
Will you slide your head to the side so I can see Texas's numbers? Oh, okay. Wow. Right. Yeah, 2018. Okay. It's really interesting that you bring this up, and we talk about this because people always clamor, but the people, when they clamor, it's because they lost, right? Like that's really the reason why this happens. This is absolutely fascinating to see what would happen. And again, we're stressing that like Trump still wins every single scenario we gave. Trump still wins the election, so that's just. We don't even have to think about the what if game because it comes out that way no matter what. And when we talk about the, Electoral College, one of the big things, it's one of my favorite questions to ask my students when we're doing like the American history test or the citizenship test, because everyone's like, it's the people. It's like, no, it's not. It's this Electoral College. And one of the interesting things about it is you can have what we call faithless elector. So when we elect electors as the population of our state, we're saying that we're sending this person to go vote in Washington, D.C. I believe it's on December 2nd, if I remember correctly, where they actually cast their ballot for the election. And Washington State had, I think, 1 or 2 faithless electors in the last election. So Hillary Clinton did not get all 12 of our votes. I believe she got 10 of them, and 2 of them went to different people. The gentleman who was trying to do this, he was trying to encourage other electors to not vote for Donald Trump and not give him a majority, thus then throwing it to the House of Representatives. But as we've seen, the House of Representatives getting 1 vote per contingent group would basically still have given Donald Trump the election. So absolutely really, really interesting stuff. We'd love to hear your opinion. So if you want to write comments on our videos about what you think of the Electoral College, or if you have an opinion that hopefully we can address and talk about. Anything else you want to kind of add?
One of the other solutions that I saw online was to do a ranked choice voting, which I don't think for president works very well because we only have 2 major parties. It would work a lot better for primaries, I think, and it might have actually it probably would have hurt President Trump in the lead up to the election. So what you would do is you would, whatever the field is, and this would have been really hard in the Washington State Democratic primary because there was 13 names on the ballot, is you would literally go through and rank all 13 of them. Who's your number 1? Is your number 1, Bernie Sanders, and your number 2 is Joe Biden, and number 3 is Pete Buttigieg, and so on and so forth. And so what you would do is you would count all of those 18 baskets, and if somebody got more than 50%, they win, and you're done. But like we see in a lot of these primaries, you had President Trump, who, when he was campaigning, was winning states with 30 or 40%. Even Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders have been winning states, winning the plurality, which just means the largest chunk. Majority means over 50%. And I stressed that with my students before we got booted out of school, was the difference between a majority and a plurality. But with ranked choice voting, what you would do is you go through and you go, okay, nobody has 50%. You would take the person with the least number of votes and you would kick them out. And then you go to all of those ballots that got counted for, I don't know, let's say Cory Booker. All of the Cory Bookers, you would look at who's their number 2 vote, and then you would add those to those percentages.
Oh, okay.
And if nobody still had 50%, you go to the next lowest person, cut them out, go to their third, go to their second or third choice candidates until somebody got over 50%. I think that's a much better way to do primaries. I don't think it matters that much for us for the presidential because we don't have a legitimate third party where it would matter enough.
No.
Sorry, Jill Stein.
Yeah.
I'm Gary Johnson.
Yeah. So, so again, this is always going to be a controversial topic until somebody takes it on, and whether it's going to be states making changes, the people like us demanding our states make changes, is what will be seen. If we can get enough states to call for a constitutional convention, which has been rumored for years now. I believe, if I remember correctly, there are 32 states have called for one, and we need 34, I think, to get it. And so again, not happening anytime soon. Very fascinating. Always comes up every single year. Next year, or this year, not next year. This coming November is going to be a huge deal. It's going to be talked about all in the news, even if it's a landslide re-election or a landslide beating or a tight race. It's going to come down to this Electoral College, and people are going to really be talking about it again. So, next week or this week, we haven't decided yet. We're kind of getting back in the groove. We're on spring break right now, but we figured we'd give you a shout and give you a video. Andrew Jackson requested on Barker's Facebook. Someone said what we wanted to know of Andrew Jackson. And I said to Barker, this will be a fun one to talk about. So if you don't know anything about Andy Jackson, we will teach you about Old Hickory in an upcoming video. Until then, I'm Turn.
I'm Bark.
And we're still going to be here for a long time. Good night, everybody.
Be safe.
And be well.